Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, I have the great Howard Beck on the show, and we're going to be talking about everything Chicago Bulls, what's going on with the team, kind of how the team's viewed around the league, all that and more right after this.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Bulls is free and available on YouTube and every other podcasting platform of your choice. Introducing Howard Beck in the building. How you doing, Howard?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks. Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining, man. I just want to talk about the Bulls, which is Locked On Bulls. I guess that makes sense. Unfortunately, missing out on an opportunity to keep their draft pick last night. It goes to the Orlando Magic. And when just kind of generally with the Bulls team right now, like what is your general feeling around like kind of this team, the direction of it, kind of their choices over the last couple of years? And then we'll get into kind of some specific things, but what's your vibe and your feel for the Bulls right now?
Yeah, so let's start with the lottery as a leaping off point, because I think it's kind of emblematic of everything that's wrong with the Bulls right now. If you really, really wanted to keep that pick, you could have leaned into a tank. You could have done the mid-season implosion or whatever. And of course, the pick itself is, what part of the payment of the Vooch trade, which itself I think was ill-conceived. So you're still paying the price for an ill-conceived trade that was all about getting back to the middle. The decision not to lean into, and granted, look, there was no guarantee they were going to end up in the top four, bottom four, whatever, to keep the pick. But all of these are of the same piece, right? They are all based on or results of a mindset that was, let's just get to the middle. Let's just be good. Let's just be relevant again. Let's just be competitive, as if that should be the goal in and of itself. And they did. Like those were the moves they've made. The lost pick is part of that, and on many levels it's part of that, because the course correction would have been, this is not working out. We've gone as far as we can with this particular path. We can't, we're probably going to lose this pick, but maybe we can keep it. What if we made an attempt to keep it? And granted, you get into the moral hazards of tanking and all other stuff, but you know what? You was really happy last night? The Dallas Mavericks. They're pretty happy. They'll take the fine. They'll take the shame. They'll take all the criticism and backlash and humiliation. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm sure they're pretty happy with the fact that they still have the 10th pick overall. Not a great pick, not a terrible pick, but a pick that they really need, either to use on a young player, or I think more likely as a trade capital. And so, yeah, the Bulls, it's funny because I'm not a Bulls fan. I'm not a fan of anybody. But I find them frustrating. They're just a frustrating team because I look at the agenda and the trajectory, and I think, where are you going? Like, that's the only thing I look at from an outsider's perspective with any of these teams. Orlando used to be, to me, the most frustrating team in the league because it just felt like they were content to just keep spinning their wheels. And they're starting to kind of pull out of that, but we'll see. The Wizards are a very frustrating team for some of the same reasons. Like, where's the course correction? At what point are you going to decide to, this just ain't working. We got to try something radically different. And in the Bulls case, it seems pretty clear. You tell me. It seems pretty clear that they're hinting at more of the same.
Yeah, it seems like they are really just going to run it back with like some minor changes. And I guess with where they are, I kind of understand it. But I always look back at it as this. While I don't look at the Vooch trade as just this huge mistake. It ended up turning into one for sure. I kind of understood the mindset, but now kind of looking back at where things are, AK came in. That was his first season of taking over president of basketball operations, and I think not being able to just kind of be bad for a couple of years, like, because you would have had a couple of more lottery picks in that case. You would have had all your own picks. I think that's going to be something we look back at long term and say it's hurt for a couple of different reasons. We could have had more talent that could have been here longer term. Yeah, we wouldn't have had a playoff series, which we've had one playoff game in the 3 years since AK took over, so congrats on that. But I also look at like a player like Patrick Williams. I think his development would be further along because he came into a situation as a rookie where he was already low on the pecking order, but then you brought in veterans that are before him, And it just his development as an offensive threat has gotten taken away because he's just been forced to stay in the corner and jack up threes.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, there's an alternate scenario, an alternate timeline here where, hey, you don't go heavy on the vets, you go more youth, and you give Patrick Williams and other young guys more reps, more latitude to do whatever.
Yeah.
But you know what? You could also then become some version of the Houston Rockets where you've got young guys with a ton of talent, but not enough structure and no real direction there. So like striking the right balance, like that's a fair position to take as a franchise, striking the right balance between promising young guys and veterans, structure versus, just giving a guy all the room in the world to just figure it out as he goes. And, it's hard to say what the right thing is there. Patrick Williams, obviously the injuries haven't helped anyway. Like, there's part of this where the lack of development or lack of sufficient development, is just lack of playing time and lack of staying healthy. But also there's also still the possibility that maybe he's not good or not good enough.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
When you look at the Bulls roster, like who do you think if anyone is kind of worth building around? We've heard recently that the Bulls are open to reshaping the roster around Zach LaVine. I still look at Zach as probably a number 2 on a team that's a perennial playoff team. But do you think the Bulls even have that piece to really start moving towards a direction of building around, or are they still just biding time until they find that player?
I always say like this is a difficult thing, but it's also the simplest thing about the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
You need the guy. And once you get the guy, good luck getting the guy. Not that easy. But once you got him, everything else makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Because if you have somebody who's truly your offensive anchor, your offensive engine, then you know what you need around him. Shooters, defenders, whatever the right fit is for that particular model of franchise star. And if you don't have a franchise star, you are constantly trying to put players in positions where they're going to probably have to do more than what they're really truly capable of. And it trickles down through the entire lineup and the entire rotation. And that's sort of what the Bulls have, right? Like Zach LaVine is a good, as you said, he's a good number 2, maybe even a number 3 on a championship team.
Mm-hmm.
DeMar DeRozan, we saw for years in Toronto. I mean, DeMar DeRozan has had a phenomenal career by almost any measure, other than, hasn't won a championship. Okay, fine. Is he a great number 1? No. Again, like he and Lowry together, like they had that nice classic ensemble cast that could get you high 40s, 50s, 50, early low 50 wins, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you were always going to get bounced by the team that had a LeBron James, because they have the guy. So there aren't enough of those MVP types to go around, granted. So I'm not saying that the onus is on the Bulls to say, well, we don't have the guy, keep blowing it up until you finally get one. Although some teams have gone that direction. Worked out nicely last night for the Spurs, by all accounts. We'll see. Yeah. At some point we have to let the hype die down and let Wembanyama actually show what he's can do in the NBA. But that was the whole point of the process in Philly, right? You don't know. You can take a zillion bites of the apple, and because the lottery is imperfect, the draft is imperfect, you may not get the guy. But if you do it enough times, you'll get a Joel Embiid. You'll get a Ben Simmons, who at least for a time looked like a franchise star. And then you can afford to miss on Markelle Fultz and Jahlil Okafor because you did it enough times that you got at least a couple of building blocks. The Bulls, it was funny. I hadn't really thought about it until we were getting ready for the pod today. And I was just kind of glancing over the roster. I'm like, my gosh, this is like the least homegrown team in the league. It feels like, everybody of significance is from somewhere else. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's no, this idea of moralizing about, built versus bought and all this crap. Just create a winning team and your fans will be happy. That's the goal. It doesn't matter how you do it. It just was striking to me that for a team that has not been good in a very long time, or I shouldn't say has not been a high level team for a while, that normally that means that you've had a lot of high draft picks. You have built at least semi-organically. You have raised some of your own guys, developed some of your own guys. And in their case, it's really a completely manufactured from the outside roster. And there's obviously a couple of their own picks there, DeSumo and White and Williams. But for a team that has tried to go the alternate route, the trade and free agency route, they haven't exactly gotten a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And I think they've reached a limit, frankly. I think that's pretty clear.
And next up, we're going to continue talking to our guest, Howard Beck. But before we do that, I got to talk to you guys about one of our sponsors, and that's eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items, exclusions do apply.
So you asked, do you just rebuild around or keep building around Levine? Probably. I don't know how many more years of this level you're going to get from DeRozan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many more wins you can expect from the DeRozan, Levine, Vooch core. You're kind of boxed in, and the only way to get unboxed is to start making the tough decisions on those guys and just shipping guys out,
Yeah, and that's what it seems like. I think most concerning for me as a Bulls fan is that it seems like this front office and this regime is hesitant to do that. And it's even more concerning with the fact that, as you said, most of the players here weren't homegrown. Those are players that we went out and got. And if you're that attached to players that you traded for, it makes me think okay, the draftees, it could work out in the long run. Maybe you do hit a player like, for example, Lauri Markkanen, who's a former Bull. Maybe it would have paid off for the Bulls to hold on to him long term. So maybe with the younger players that ends up paying off. But it's like, if you're not willing to make adjustments to when you see that plan didn't work, the roster that you built did not work. I used to say that the Bulls had a cap on this version of the roster as a second round exit, and now I'm like, can you even win multiple playoff games with this roster? That's the biggest concern there.
Yeah, and that's why it's time to step back and say, okay, look, if the goal was, and I don't want to put this entirely on Arturas and that front office, because all of these front offices, or at least most of them, are beholden to what the owner's whims are, right? We can criticize the Wizards for keeping Bradley Beal too long and extending him over and over and over again. And all. The ownership did not want to let Bradley Beal go. They wanted sometimes you are just hamstrung.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, everything I've gathered over the last few years is that the Bulls from the top level wanted to simply be relevant again. They were tired of being irrelevant. Let's just be in the playoffs. All right, well, you can do that. Any bad team can decide to go all in on a push for the 7th or 8th seed, or now what we would just call the play-in.
Yeah.
Sure, you can get there, but there are two different types of 7th, 8th seed in this league. Maybe more than two types, but you could be a young team on the rise, right? Like if the Thunder break through next year and make the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed, they might even be better than that, by the way. But if the Thunder break through, them being a 7th or 8th seed is an accomplishment. They are a young team on the rise, and it'll be step one toward being somebody. It's like the Grizzlies a couple years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Team on the rise, first year a low seed, but you can see a ceiling beyond that. There are teams that are sometimes hitting the 7th or 8th spot because they're on the way down. A veteran team that is finally eroding.
Yeah.
And then there's the Bulls. then there's the Bulls, a team that basically made a bunch of moves that were specifically designed to be. Obviously, I'm sure they hoped for more than being a low playoff seed, but you could kind of see that was their limit was probably going to be a 1st or 2nd round out, and with nothing beyond it, right? So they're not the team on the rise. They're not the team necessarily on the decline. They're a team that the ceiling is built in, and they've already hit it. And because of DeRozan's age, and because of the age of all three of them, right?
Yeah.
In DeRozan's case, it's because you're worried about him going into decline at some point. In Levine and Vooch's case, it's because they've been in the league long enough that you should be pretty confident that this is just who they are. Vooch is not going to turn into a ferocious rim protector tomorrow. Zach LaVine is not going to turn into a lockdown defender or consummate playmaker tomorrow, although he has his moments as a playmaker. They are who they are. So where's the upside? And if you don't have the upside, then you should be rethinking your strategy, I think. Unless the goal is simply to just be okay, to just be, a low-level playoff team that will have some fun moments, sell some tickets, get knocked out in the first round again. But that's where they are. Like, there's nothing on this. There's nothing that they've done so far or that they present right now that makes me believe there's some great upside in the next couple of years. And the way to fix that is to say, let's see what we can get for DeMar DeRozan. I would see what I could get for Zach LaVine for that matter. The Vooch thing is tough because if he walks, you're not able to replace him that easily. Yeah. I don't know who you're getting to be your center, but locking into Vooch, if you're going to have a center who is primarily an offensive player and does not provide, versatile defense and rim protection and all the other stuff that you want in today's NBA, then that guy better be Nikola Jokic or maybe Domantas Sabonis.
Great points there. Great points. Those are great points. Now, I want to ask you about coaching, right? We talk a lot about players, but I think sometimes we can either overrate or underrate just the impact that coaching's having on a team's success or not. I like to think that people generally tend to underrate how important good coaching is for a team. But especially when you look at a team that has players that they were trying to develop and everything like that. When you look at the job that Coach Billy Donovan has done so far with the Bulls, do you see it as he's done the best that he can with the roster that's been in balance? Do you look at it and say he's could have probably done a little bit better job at empowering the younger players to kind of force that development? How do you look at the job Billy Donovan's done in the last few years?
Yeah, it's tough. I always say, so much of coaching is the stuff that we don't see, right? We see a couple hours every night when they're on the court, and we immediately start picking apart, rotation decisions and matchup decisions and that kind of stuff. But so much of what they do, of course, is out of our view. The practices and shoot-arounds and game planning and meetings with their staff and even the decisions that they make that we sometimes criticize are based on what they've been seeing from their guys in practice or shoot around. And so it's like, why? Well, why are they using him more? Why did they make that? It's probably all the stuff we don't see. Yeah. It's not to say that there's not mistakes being made at times or that there's not something that you can criticize. There's just a lot we don't know. When it comes to the Bulls, yeah, look, there a lot of players who were pretty fully formed when they got him. I think he's gotten about as much as you can expect out of it. I never look at the Bulls and think they've underachieved really. Mm-hmm. And then, you turn to like the young guys and player development. Has he done as good a job in player development with the young players in Chicago as he did in Oklahoma? Maybe not. Context is a little bit different in terms of where they are in a trajectory too. We talked about this before about like how much latitude are you giving to and how many minutes are you force feeding or possessions are you force feeding to a Patrick Williams or someone else when you've got these three established offensive pillars who you've spent all this money to and draft capital and everything else to get. So it's hard. It's hard to fully assess. I mean, I think overall he's done a good job. Okay. I don't find a lot to criticize there. I'm sure Bulls fans have probably found plenty because, fans of every team that's disappointing will always find a way to blame the coach.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I'm guilty of it. Absolutely myself. I won't lie. And I think sometimes for me, because Bulls are the only team I've ever been a fan of. Born and raised a Chicago Bulls fan. Dad's from the South Side of Chicago. And so I think for me, I can learn to be a little bit more critical of things with this team. And then when I kind of take a step back and realize, I think it was eye-opening to me, the amount of coaches that's been fired since the regular season ended till now. We're not even through the playoffs yet. And how those fan bases really do view their coaches almost as the same way that we view Billy Donovan. And those were coaches that have won Coach of the Year. Those are coaches that have just been in finals in the last handful of years. So I do think that we can be a little bit too zoomed in and be very critical there. I will say, though, the development, you made a great point earlier where it's like, okay, is it that we're not developing correctly, or is it just that they're just not going to be that good? And that's a scary question to ask yourself and to realize that the player that we hope is going to turn into something that we see potential in may just never hit that potential. So, yeah.
And this, I'm not around, excuse me, I'm not around that team all the time. So certain things you pick up when you're a beat writer covering a team from close range, you can get a sense sometimes of like, all right, the players who care versus the ones who, are just content to just be in the league. The guys who have the higher motor or the higher work ethic, the guys who are sticking around to work on their game after practice and are coming early. I don't know, like if the question is like, say, Patrick Williams specifically, I don't have a sense of his rep, to be honest. So I don't know, but when we see a guy stall out as a young player, it's often some combination of all those things I just mentioned. And you don't know. And sometimes it's circumstance. Sometimes it's some teams are certainly better than others at developing young players. But even the ones that are good at it, have some misfires. So it's sometimes hard to tell where the blame or just the explanation lies for a young player who's kind of stalled out a little bit, as maybe Patrick Williams has.
Stalled is a great word for Patrick Williams, man. I see so much potential in him sometimes where he just looks great, and then he'll disappear for 5 games in a row. It's one of the more frustrating things around. Now, me and you both, we talked about kind of how this team was brought together through free agency trades, things like that. And Arturis has talked about, our president of basketball operations, of making the Bulls a free agent destination again. And I look at that and I say, I don't get that vibe. I don't think anybody's clamoring to come to the Chicago Bulls. Do you share that sentiment, or do you think that maybe more players would be open to coming to the Chicago Bulls? It's just that we have that limitation from ownership of not going into the luxury tax. What vibe do you get from the Bulls in that regard, if you have one?
I think that in today's NBA, one, free agency hasn't been the salvation for teams for the most part, right? Like, especially, when you're going for the top line talent, if you're looking at the MVP types, all NBA types, most of those guys are changing teams via trade rather than free agency these days. It doesn't mean you can't, use cap room to get really important players. But it's a tricky path. When we ask, the question about the Bulls, and I've been asked this about other teams as well at times, are they a destination? Are they a place that guys want to go? It depends on the guy. Like they're so in some cases, it's about, you want to win right away, and so you're looking for the team that you think is going to win. If at some places it's just about whether you're going to get the contract you want, the reps you want, the role you want. So it's always more complicated than just, are the Bulls an attractive destination? Like, they're an attractive franchise, obviously, proud history, major market, great place to live. A little too cold for me, frankly, but maybe I just need bigger coats. But I don't like the Bulls don't have some burden to carry there anymore, right? Like, for a long time in the post-Jordan era, the stars didn't want to go there because nobody wanted to play in the shadow of Michael. And then, they catch lightning in a bottle with that Derrick Rose group and Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, and all that. They got lucky, obviously, in the lottery to get Rose in the first place. And that team was very homegrown, very much homegrown. And, it had its run, but there was probably always kind of a ceiling there, even without Derrick Rose blowing out his knee, right? But they still have never been the team that we look at as, the place that if they just cleared cap room, guys are going to flock there. But guess what? The Knicks are supposed to be that, and I've seen them whiff multiple times. That's my backyard. The Lakers and Clippers, my old backyard. I worked in LA for 7 years earlier in my career. Like, okay, yeah, the Lakers have a history, but it's usually been via trade and not free agency. And they had plenty of guys slam the door in their face in the latter parts of the Kobe era and post Kobe era before they finally landed LeBron. The Nets did get Durant and Kyrie. Didn't turn out so well, but in the moment that was a victory. And the Clippers got Kawhi as a free agent in tandem with the Paul George trade. And for a moment that looked like a victory. Hasn't turned out so well. But like, even the places that we think of as destinations based on market size and weather, it's not a perfect game. So I think more than anything, what you want to do, and I think the Knicks are doing a good job of this right now. Like, the Knicks wanted Durant and Irving, or Durant at least, and Kyrie was the price you paid in 2019 if you wanted him. They whiffed. They picked up a bunch of other guys, some of whom did not work out so well. And Randall, it depends on the year whether you want to say whether it's worked out. But what the Knicks have done right is, when they had the cap room last year, they made a big bet on Jalen Brunson, which has paid off brilliantly for them. And they're now doing a kind of almost a version of what the Clippers and Nets were before they got those hauls in 2019, which is, you're not going to be great, but you're going to be good enough that other guys around the league are going to take notice and say, you know what, something good is starting to come out, or is starting to evolve there. And, Durant saw what the Nets were doing. Durant and Kyrie saw what the Nets were doing, and it made sense to go. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard saw what the Clippers were doing, and it made sense to go there. Stars want to go where they can go play with a great supporting cast and a front office they have faith in, and a coaching staff they have faith in. So those are the things that you try to put in place, if nothing else, right? And so if I were going to argue against my earlier position about the Bulls, I'd say, well, if you're competitive and you're relevant, that's a much more attractive destination than a team that is tanking for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they're not in a position to actually then add to it, right? Because they do have a bunch of expensive guys. So, the good news is you're competitive. The bad news is there's a limit to how far it can go. And I don't know how you would get the guy, even if there was somebody available.
That's a great point. Our assets are very weird. Heading into this now, I want to ask you something about general NBA, not necessarily Bulls specific. Before we go, we're heading into offseason, which this is kind of the last offseason before the new CBA takes effect, and teams that have been in the luxury tax are going to start being heavily penalized. Do you think we're going to see an offseason of a lot of movement to try to avoid that? Or do you think we're going to see teams kind of double down and just accept how penalizing being in that luxury tax over that second shelf, I should say, for 2 consecutive years is going to be?
Yeah. So the new CBA, and I have not digested all of it yet. It could be a while. There's a lot. It's like the tax code. Every revision just makes it 50% larger until just don't drop the NBA CBA on your foot. You will be out for the rest of the season. It's not so. In the past, every time the NBA tried to ratchet down the limits on the top spenders, it was with more punitive taxes and then more punitive and more punitive. This time, they're taking away stuff. Yeah. They're taking away your ability, and they started to do that even in the previous CBA, but now it's really punitive. Now it's like you're losing exceptions, you're losing the ability to make trades, you're losing all kinds of stuff where your tools for supporting your stars, your tools for creating a viable rotation are just being taken away. So that mostly affects, I think, the Warriors and Clippers, but it has a trickle-down effect on everybody, because if you were thinking you were heading in that direction, you're going to reel back a little bit. I suspect this summer we're going to see plenty of activity, just because, look at the Western Conference and how tight it was. We've talked about the parity, the incredibly weird parity we had this season, and a 6, 7, and 8 seeds all advance out of the first round for the first time ever. That's a recipe for everybody being bold. And that's what the play-in created anyway. The play-in created a recipe, and the Bulls are an indicator of this. We're not great, but you know what? We're going to be in the running for at least a play-in spot. So let's just keep leaning into it. And so I think a lot more teams are trying to be competitive. So, if you were just to run down, the standings, and I promise I will not go through all 30 teams here, but, if you're in the Western Conference, right? Like the Warriors aren't going anywhere. They're going to try to run it back and keep supplementing. So, but they have moves that they need to make, right? The Lakers, whether they win this series or not against the Nuggets, found something, and they're going to want to keep, adding to that. The Timberwolves need to turn things around. Is Karl Anthony Towns going to finally be made available in trade? Who knows? The Thunder, as I mentioned earlier, are on their way up. The Pelicans, they get Zion back. So there's all these teams, and the Mavericks are desperate to do stuff to fix their roster around Luka. And the Nets in my backyard have a bazillion assets from the 2 trades, both players and picks. The Hawks need to do something. A lot of teams need to do something, and I think are inclined to. Look, that's healthy. In an average offseason in the past, you might have, a handful of teams that were really going for it and a ton that were content to just, let another offseason go, tank another season, see what happens. I think we're going to have a busy summer. I really do.
It does shape up to be that, and I think it's going to be better for the league. I think this was a year that parity was the buzzword for the league, and I think that this is going to kind of be maintained as well with kind of the new restrictions around the CBA, at least until teams kind of figure out the best balance there as they're trying to figure it out. And I think it's best for everyone. It's best for us as viewers. These playoff series have been great, almost all of them so far in the playoffs as well. Fun to watch. So I think it's paying off, man. Adam Silver wanted parity, and I think this is the closest we've ever really been to it.
Yes, this is basically his fever dream at this point. He said all the time back in the 2011 lockout, every single day, every time we met with him and David Stern, and Stern was still commissioner, but Adam was the one who was put in charge of those negotiations, and it was clear at that he was he was the commissioner in waiting. And Adam had this phrase that was burned into all of our brains because those of us who covered the lockout heard this constantly, which was, we would like to have a league where 30 teams, if well managed, have a chance to compete for championships. And the if well managed part's a pretty big piece of that. There's still plenty of teams that are not well managed, but he said it all the time. 30 teams have a chance. And it feels like this is as close as I've ever seen the NBA to all 30 teams having some semblance of hope going into the course of a season. It's not truly 30, but it's it used to be like 6, 3. And now there's a bunch of teams that feel like they have a shot to make it to the finals, and a bunch more that if they get one good break can knock out that first group. Right. So it's, I don't know if it sustains. That's the fascinating part. Was this an outlier? Did everything just kind of, was it a perfect storm this past season?
Yeah.
Or is this the new normal? I guess we'll find out next season.
Yeah. Before we go, last question, Howard, finals matchup. Who's your predictions to be the finals matchup this year?
It's funny because if you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and 6 months ago, it would have probably been different every time. I think the only constant has been that the Boston Celtics have the best top to bottom talent. And even before the Bucks got knocked out, I thought the Celtics should be the favorite in the East, not by a ton, but I thought this should be the favorite. And once the Bucks were out, I thought for sure the Celtics. And then they keep doing stuff every round to make us doubt that. But but I do think, look, I love what the Heat have done, and it's been really impressive, but like that joyride's coming to an end. The Celtics just have too much talent, and as hard as the Heat play, I just don't think they can pull this out. So the Celtics is the easy part. Obviously I watched game 1 of Nuggets Lakers. Even before the series started, I was spinning myself in circles trying to figure that one out. The Lakers are clearly not your average 7 seed by any stretch.
Yeah.
And they're not your average challenge for the Denver Nuggets. And it was a great win by the Nuggets last night. Jokic was amazing. The Lakers, it seemed like, figured some things out along the way. It's truly a coin flip. I had a buddy who was going hard at why the Nuggets were going to win, and just to be obnoxious, I said Lakers in 6. So I'm just going to say Lakers in 6, even though they're now down 0-1, making that a little bit steeper. But I'm probably going to be wrong on that. I think the Celtics win regardless. I felt for some time, even before we got to the postseason, I thought whoever came out of the East this year was going to win the championship. I think that team is the Celtics. But I've been wrong 1,000 times already. So what's 1,001?
There you go, Lakers Celtics, man. That'll be a fun series to say the least, for all the storylines and everything else going in. But Howard, thank you so much for your time today, man. Tell the listeners and viewers where they can check you out at.
Yeah, for sure. At Howard Beck on Twitter. If you're someone who's fortunate enough to have found your way into Blue Sky, I'm over there too. Just to search for my name there. All my written work I'm writing during the playoffs. I'm correspondent for GQ Sports, so you can find my stuff there. But I also have an Authory page. That's author with a Y on the end. So authory.com/Howard Beck. Everything that I'm writing for GQ, everything that I wrote for Sports Illustrated, New York Times, Bleacher Report, all my past stuff is all there as well.
Well, thank you, Howard, for your time again, man. We appreciate you, and hopefully your prediction comes right for the finals, because I think that'll be a fun final series. There you go, man.
Appreciate it, Haize. Good to join you.
All right, and you can follow me at CEO Haize. You can follow us collectively at Locked On Bulls. Make sure you guys go and also check out Pat the Designer over at Pat the Designer. Before Pat, I'm Haize. This has been Locked On Bulls, and we are out, y'all. Peace.